I'm Derek Wheatley, and welcome to episode 65 of the Weekly podcast. As always, thank you very much for tuning in today, for listening last week. I'd really like to thank Ciara Helion because she really stepped up to the plate for us. We messed up the first recording. I say we, I don't mean Ciara, me, and we'll blame John as well, even though he wasn't involved. But we got it back together, and Ciara stepped up I think it was about 5 or 10 minutes later, and we recorded it again, and can't thank her enough for that. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Our Live and Joyful series on Instagram returned this week. It was good crack. I enjoyed it. We've done 19. I think I might do 20 and leave it at that, and then go back to live, the Facebook Live. It's just the problem with trying to get guests for both things and try to level them off, and it's kind of a bit, I don't know. It's not really that stressful, but it depends on what day you're having, I guess, or what kind of a day. But this is a big show. I'm going to introduce my guest first, and then I'll tell you why it's a big show. She is a poet, an activist, and a healer, and her name is Laura Murphy. How are you, Laura?
I'm good, Derek. How are you?
I'm very well. Congratulations to you. Congratulations to me, to John, and to everybody. You are our 50th guest.
Yay! Congratulations to you guys. That's amazing.
Thank you very much. It is pretty amazing considering where we started, but it's just one of those ones that I like. It's been slowly creeping up, but I haven't been thinking about it too much. And then I realized that it was close, and we had 2 guests on twice. Didn't count them twice, counted them once, and then it worked out that you were 50th. So I'm really, really happy about that.
Amazing. 50 is my new lucky number.
Maybe mine as well. Do you know, I had this weird experience this morning, and it's not. I don't normally run into these things at the start, but I went out for a run, and I'm going down. I live out in the country, so I'm out like with the bog road and that, and the farms and fields and stuff. And I'm running, and I see this thing ahead of me. I'm kind of thinking, it was shiny, so I thought it was like one of those bales of hay, wrapped. And it turns out it was a car down in the ditch, in the like fully down in the ditch, just like a Jeep, I should say. So I'm thinking, that's a bit strange. Now, I watch a lot of, I listen to a lot of true crime. So I'm like, maybe I should check it, because you just don't know. Like, you don't want to be the one to run past. And the windows looked fogged up. I was thinking like, oh, maybe. Now, fortunately, I was able to get down into it. And it wasn't fog. It was like outside kind of condensation, but there was nobody in it. So I said, that's for, whoever drove it in there, I do not know how they did it. It's a straight road. So they obviously climbed out the passenger seat and went. So as I was running back, I went as far as I normally do, and I run back, and then I come back, and there's this car and a machine and this young lad, and I was like, well, it was definitely him. And but everybody's safe, everybody's well, but it's just one of those strange, 7 o'clock in the morning, nobody else around, and it's just this Jeep is in the ditch, and it was quite a start to the morning. It's quite exciting, But
some adventure going on somewhere anyway, isn't there?
I don't know how you go in there on a straight road, but who am I to say? I don't even know how to drive, so that's another story. But listen, let's get into it. That's distraction. Laura, could you give us a short history of your upbringing, please?
Yeah, I had a fairly average Irish upbringing. I was born and reared in Portlaoise, County Laois, right in the middle of Ireland, the most landlocked county in the country. So Laois is the only county that doesn't touch another county that touches the sea. So that's the claim to fame, with that in the prison. But anyway, so born and reared, I went to school in an all-girls school in Portlaoise. I had enough of that then. I went to a co-educational school for secondary. Beautiful, magical place in Ballyfin, and that's where a lot of magic happened. Some of the happiest years of my life were in school, and I feel so blessed because not many people can say that. And fairly, fairly comfortable, usual things that life can throw at people. We can speak about that later. And I think looking back now, the age of 14 was actually a pivotal year in my life. I did a bit of work a few years ago just on tracking the lines of development to see what were the defining moments in my life. And randomly, and I had no conscious awareness of it, I just thought my years were just fairly uneventful, sailed along, few bumps, but when I look back, it was like the age of 14 was this year that some amazing things happened. And it was 1994, and it was the same year that Riverdance exploded across the world, really. But it was the same year that I started to write poetry, just randomly. And again, we'll go into that later, but it just kind of came from nowhere. I also discovered that that I had this ability to heal pain with my hands, which was something that was completely outside of my frame of reference. Myself and my mum were in a crash, and she had this pain in her back. It was chronic pain that she couldn't get rid of for about 2 years. And I was just sitting at her feet one day, and this excruciating pain just shot up my back. And I was like, oh my God, what's that? I explained it to Mum, and it was the same pain that she had. And then out of nowhere, this impulse to just direct all of the love that I felt for her out through my hands and place my hands on her back. And about 10 minutes later, she went white, and she was like, oh my God, the pain has gone. And then I kind of went a bit white and went, oh my God. But anyway, you're not going to see your mom in this pain. So that continued. And, I was like, I warned her, do not tell anybody about this. Like, I'm like 14, like, and she didn't. But neighbors and stuff like that, or family members would come with a headache, and they'd say, can just put your hands on my head, and then the headache would go, and things like that. And that was when I was in Ballyfin. It was my second year in Ballyfin as well. And I don't know, I think there was something about my physical location in the Slieve Blooms that was connected me to some kind of a creative energy. And I believed that the same consciousness, or the same energy that was arising in me, manifested in the poetry, and manifested in this kind of innate natural, like I believe supernatural is based in the natural. It's not paranormal, or it's just science we haven't discovered yet. So that was probably the key defining moment, even though it took me, oh my God, like years and years after to even actualize, or to understand where all of this was coming from. So yeah, then I went to college I had a lifelong, that was in 14, I discovered WB Yeats and Maud Gonne, and they were crucial to what we'll speak about later, and the Imbas and the poetry and everything. And I went to college then in UCD, studied arts, studied English literature, psychology, and information studies. I really only went to study Yeats, like that was my passion, Yeats and Maud Gonne, and that part of Irish history. And then didn't know what I wanted to do after that exactly. Fell into a marketing job on work experience, and liked it. Like, I'd never had planned to go into business or anything like that, but I liked it, and I seemed to be good at it. Kept kind of getting promoted nearly by default. Well, I was obviously trying my best, but it wasn't, I hadn't seen myself being in that line of work, but it just kept happening, and I kept rolling with it. And yeah, now I work for one of Ireland's best loved brands in marketing and communications. I'm out sick at the moment, but that's in a nutshell how I got here.
Yeah, it's a very good roundup. I have to actually shout out to Leash, but Leash has been such a, for this podcast, I think, I don't know, 5 or 6, I think, people from Leash so far. So Leash is on the leaderboard. Leash is number 2 to Westmeath. So yeah,
Wow.
flying. Yeah, it's flying. I think everybody has been Port Darlington, and I know Kieran. I know you know Kieran Highland. I know he's just from just outside. And then
Yeah.
obviously you're from Port Leash, but yeah, Leash has been very prevalent on this podcast. It's great. So then, when did you first become aware of mental health?
First became aware of mental health when I was about maybe 17. My parents separated, and there was a few different things going on, and it was just, it kind of crept up on me, this kind of low mood. It was a low mood, which was understandable and explainable, but then it kind of grew into something that I wasn't able to manage, and it was I really felt the weight of it. It was really dragging me down. I went to the doctor at that time, the GP, to ask for something. Like, I just felt I needed something to support me and to get me out of this kind of phase, so I could then rely on my own kind of strength and exercises and things like that to go the rest of the way. And I asked her if she had something herbal or whatever. And what she prescribed me was this drug called Seroxat. And I don't know if it's even out still or if you've heard of it, but it's a fairly hardcore antidepressant. And it was years later on a Panorama documentary I saw that it was like, it's for over 18s only, first of all. And then in America, the FDA have this warning on the packet to say may cause homicidal and suicidal tendencies. So, and it was then I was looking back and going, thank God I had the kind of intuition and the sense to come off them. Like, I was on them for 6 weeks, and I just, oh my God, it created like so many more problems. It was just an awful feeling that it came over me at times. And then I just, at the time, mental health, there was a huge stigma around mental health. It wasn't spoken about. The words weren't even, they didn't form our vocabulary at the time. And but it was just because I didn't think there was anything else, anywhere else to go for support or whatever. So I just then said, well, here, I'm not going to rely on these drugs. They're making me worse. I'm going to see what I can do myself. And then I suppose it was the poetry and things like that, and following my natural passions, I suppose, and immersing and maybe escaping to a degree through them. But that was the first discovery of mental health, and that set me on a path of a passion for mental health, and specifically destigmatizing mental health. In all of my marketing and communications work, I always had a mental health, aspect to my campaigns, whether it was awareness or raising money through corporate social responsibility. And I went and studied counselling and psychotherapy as well in NUI Maynooth, and did a diploma course with Middlesex University as well. Obviously didn't end up to go on and be a counsellor for various different reasons, but understanding the dynamics of mental health and understanding the dynamics of just being human really is one of the best things that I ever did. And I think if you are human in this world, it's just a responsibility for yourself and for your family and your community to have an understanding and to have an interest in mental health, and also in how we can take things forward and progress things. So yeah,
I think it's very mature for a 17-year-old to first of all to make the decision to go to a doctor, and because of a mood or how they were feeling, and then to decide that the antidepressant wasn't for them, or it wasn't working for them. I understand that an awful lot of the antidepressants, unfortunately, have that side effect of suicidal ideation, and when you're going through suicidal ideation, and you're having it every day or every other day, and that's thrown in on top of it. It's a very, very scary thing. But it's like I take medication. I have since for 11 years now. I still do, and it's worked an awful lot for me. But there are some glaring holes in it that could be fixed up a bit. But yeah, like for a 17-year-old to step up like that is pretty it's pretty amazing, really, like, because it's going into doctor surgery at that age is daunting anyway. It's a strange experience for a teenager, but to do it in that way is pretty incredible. Speaking of incredible, see the link there. Sometimes I surprise myself with these links. But you took part in an event at the Abbey Theatre, and the event was home.
yeah.
What was that event about?
It was historic, really. Nothing like that has ever happened in Ireland before. It was a production to give voice to the stories that had and the voices that have been brutally suppressed in our country for over 100 years. And that is the voices of the survivors, the mothers and children of Ireland's mother and baby homes. So it arose from it's been in the news, I suppose. Everyone's probably heard of them. Had a commission of investigation running to investigate what happened over the 100 years since 1922. What happened in Ireland with these mother and baby homes institutions. There's many survivors have been campaigning for years and years for justice. They were trying to get their stories heard. They were systematically abused. The babies, there was forced adoptions, there was all sorts of horrific things going on at the time, with continued ramifications, with the many adopted people can't locate their birth certs, and they still can't. So it's not just a historical injustice, it's into the present day. So anyway, because of these courageous survivors, fighting for years and years to have their stories heard, the government were eventually forced to have a commission of investigation. There was 24 million euro spent on this commission. There were a few people appointed, like judges and people like that, appointed into the commission to fully investigate exactly what was going on, the level of abuse, what were the conditions like, and to report back into a report that would be available for the public. It took, I think it was 6 years, 24 million, and the report was released this year. And basically, this was the one chance for healing, for truth to come out, for truth that had been suppressed for generations to finally come out, and to start a process of healing for these survivors, which there are hundreds of thousands of them. But the report was a whitewash of trauma. Many of the survivors who gave statement and provided testimony and who re-traumatized themselves to give the account of their stories in these homes in good faith that it would be reflected as truth in this report. Many of them are saying that their stories were misrepresented, many of the details were omitted, and the manner in which the report was compiled and disseminated was atrocious. It was a document, it was like a document even probably higher, like academics found it hard to get through it. Survivors wanted to read it to see how accurately things were reflected, but it was really, really hard. Survivors weren't provided with a hard copy. They were told, they were just given a link and said, go online and download this thousands and thousands page document, and they weren't able to access. It was really disrespectful and re-traumatizing. The Taoiseach then issued an official apology, which was so welcome, because these women were women and children. Like, the women spent their lives being ashamed, because in our society, up until even now, it was just, if you were put into a mother or baby's home, it was hidden from your community at the time. You were a disgrace, you were a sinner, so these survivors carried an awful lot of unnecessary shame and a sense of worthlessness and a sense of guilt. And this apology was going to be a validation of their humanity and a validation that the state had done them wrong, and the state, perpetrated significant abuses. And the apology did outline that the state was responsible for atrocious abuse, that the state and the church together, who were in charge of, responsible for these women and children, that they were responsible for these abuses that took place. And it highlighted some of the abuses. And it actually, Micheál Martin specifically said that the shame that you carried is not yours, but it was the government's for letting this happen. And that was so welcome. And I remember just bawling, listening to that and thinking of my mum, because my mum is a survivor. And I was just, I knew the shame she carried all her life, and I could feel it lifting off my shoulders because it was lifting off her shoulders. And then it came to another point in the letter, in the apology, where they said, the Taoiseach said, that it was society that was responsible for these atrocities, basically, and that the fathers of the children and the families of the mothers who got pregnant, were pious, and that they didn't want to know them when they got pregnant and threw them into the home. But I knew from my case that was not the case, and that I thought, well, if the government can disperse blame like that, how can they be accountable? How can they be responsible, and how can they fix it? And I knew the turmoil that my grandparents went through when my mom was pregnant, and how much they wanted to do the right thing by her, how much they did not know of what was the abuses that were going on in the homes at the time. And also that there was that the church and state basically colluded in Ireland to create this staunch Catholicism that just had this overriding shadow of guilt and shame on all of us. And I did not want that to be whitewashed in this apology. It was whitewashed over as if Irish people were responsible for this, the way Ireland was at that time. And I knew from my passion of that time in history that that was not the case, that our Irish people were not always Catholics. We were always very spiritually minded, but we weren't always Catholics. And then I just had so much to say, and I wrote a letter to the Taoiseach, and I wrote a letter basically highlighting how it was the church and state collusion, that the church and state coercively controlled Irish people through instruments of shame and fear to behave in ways that were contrary to their nature. And in the letter, I got a lot of other things off my chest as well, about how Irish women were pivotal in the fight for Irish independence. But when we won our independence, because of them, 50%. And then when it came to writing the Constitution, they were literally written out, and this clause was written in saying your place is in the home and stuff like that. And I got all of that said, and I thought it was a letter. I thought it was just a piece of writing for my own mental health, to get rid of this stuck energy that the anger was creating.
Did you sorry to interrupt them. Did you plan, did you sit down to write that? Was that something that was kind of brewing in your mind, and then you wrote it? Was it, do you know what I mean? Was it like a kind of a conscious decision to sit down and write it?
No, my conscious decision was to sit down and because sometimes when you're angry and you start formulating your argument to the person you're angry with in your head, and you're fantasizing about giving them this and telling them how it is. It was kind of like that with Micheál Martin, and I was visualizing myself telling them da, 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 and da, da, da. And then I'm like, I had this, because I have Lyme disease, which we'll speak about later, but I can't afford physically to have any stuck energy in my system. So I realized that this was really crippling me. And I consciously sat down to maybe write a Facebook post to just get it off my chest. Okay. And I got in this flow, and literally like maybe 6 hours later, I had this letter, and it was a big long letter. Usually when you need to keep things short these days because attention spans are like 2 seconds. Yeah. But this letter, and I was like, I wasn't even aware that I was aware of so much of Irish history. But it just shows the level of ingrained trauma, I think, that's not just in me as a second generation survivor, but that's in every Irish person. Because then I sent it out to a few newspapers, and it was published in the national media. Then it went viral. Then celebrities started to endorse it, and like Jim Fitzpatrick, he's the artist who created the iconic Che Guevara image.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so he tweeted, and he was like, everybody read this letter. This writing is as good as Heaney. And I'm like, what? So it really resonated with Irish people. And I believe that's because there is so much stuck trauma from the untruths and the things that we haven't been able to fully name and fully digest. Like, we're still recovering from our colonization. It was brushed under the carpet, like the famine and the colonization. In order to survive, we needed to brush it under the carpet and get on. But we're still the shadows still exist, you know. So I think that's why it resonated so much with people. And then I get an email in from the Abbey Theatre, which was incredible because my lifelong hero since the age of 14 was W.B. Yeats, and my heroine was Maud Gonne, not just because she was Yeats's muse, but because of her humanitarian work and the incredible woman that she was. So he was the founder of the Abbey Theatre, and next thing I get an email from the Abbey Theatre inviting me to deliver the letter from the stage of the Abbey in a production that was going to honor the voices of the survivors. So the voices that had been suppressed for generations, and the voices that this apology was and report had tried to suppress and could have so easily got away with it, suppressing our voices. Our National Theatre then does this historic production, something that's never been done before, to actually read the testimony and read the words of the survivors that didn't make it into the report. And I'm just sitting there going, how many dreams come true in this one thing, you know? And here was me, I was debilitated with Lyme for 2 years, housebound basically, wrote this letter out of trauma, and next thing I find myself able to deliver it from our national stage, which was Yeats's like crowning glory. It was an honor. It was one of the greatest honors of my life to be able to do it.
It was when I watched it, it's still available to watch on YouTube. Actually, the whole show, the whole performance, and some incredible people at it that spoke at it, and you know, and I mean that, I don't mean that in like, oh, the celebrity aspect of it. I mean everybody, you know, the collection of people who spoke at it. But when I listened to your speech, it was very easy to get up there and be quite nervous, I would imagine. It was very easy to kind of lose the passion that is in the piece while you're talking because you're nervous. But I think it came out an awful lot in the way you spoke about it. Were you? Did you feel that when you were talking?
I was really nervous. Yeah, for a lot of reasons. But the Abbey, the stage of the Abbey Theatre, like that's so many people's dream to get in the Abbey, and I had been mentally debilitated and physically debilitated for 2 years in a cave, like barely able to articulate conversation with my friends. And then all of a sudden I find myself on the stage of the Abbey. So I didn't know whether my brain would be able to carry forth what I needed to carry forth. And then the weight of it kind of started to sink in. I felt such a sense of duty, and that carried me through the whole thing. Like, this is for so many people. And like one of my lifelong things that I've carried was the sorrow for feminine voices in Ireland being oppressed, and my mum and survivors. So that did carry me through, but I was very nervous. And the day before, I just got into a state of apathy, like the fire that had kind of was burning in me. I think it was through nerves, just left. And then I was really worried that I wouldn't have the energy, that the nerves would get the better of me. And then randomly, my favorite living poet, Stephen James Smith, just messaged me on Instagram and asked me how I was and did I need any support. You know, because I was just like thrown kind of into the limelight all of a sudden. I hadn't prepared for it. And then I was able to just say to him, you know, the fire has gone out of me now. I'm due in the Abbey stage tomorrow. I don't know what to do. And he sent back this 9-minute message, and it's really practical. And I think it was the love and the support and the care that came from someone that I admired so much. And the fact that it was a man and it was the masculine, because what we were doing here was really bringing out and supporting the feminine. And I knew that was the level that he was coming in to support, because he really supported the work and the activism aspect of it. And that was, he really helped me, and I was able to put those practical things into action, because I was deep in the emotion and I was very much leaning on my own spirituality and all that kind of stuff for the strength. But when you need to do something practical, like get onto the Abbey, you just need to maybe come out of that and get into the masculine area of structure and form and delivery. And then just as I was going on the stage, I remembered Maud Gonne, and that she was on that stage as Kathleen Ni Houlihan, who was the main character in a play that Yeats wrote about a sovereign and free Ireland.
Okay.
And Kathleen Ni Houlihan symbolized a free Ireland. And I just said, would Maud Gonne be nervous here? Like, you know, and it was just like, nerves are about you. This is not about you. And I went on and I just felt so happy and so grateful and so full of responsibility. And it was one of the best moments of my life. I'm getting emotional now, even thinking about it.
It's
And
brilliant.
so, yeah.
Yeah, you can't help but be moved by the statements, by your own, obviously, but some of the other statements that I listened to, or I should say watched on YouTube, and that's why I think people should definitely go back. And even if they don't have time for the 3 hours, go in and, you know, in and out and dip in and out a few of them, because I think it's like you said, it's a very historic thing that happened. And uh, those women that got up on that stage and talked about what they talked about, like it's heartbreaking, but it's quite inspiring at the same time. And I think, you know, to find that balance is very, very difficult. You spoke about empathy, or lack thereof, I should say, really, in the report, the statement on the report the government made. Where do you think the empathy was lacking in that?
God, where do you start? Like, maybe I'm naive, but you know, I like to think that the government did want to do the right thing. Like, you know, individually, I'm finding it hard to pick out, you know, anyone in the government who's a bad person. You
Yeah.
know, I do well, and I might be naive, I don't know, but the overall way it was handled was just completely devoid of empathy. First of all, if you're going to engage people who have been deeply traumatized and are still going through a process of trauma, you need to understand that you're dealing with very sensitive issues and very sensitive emotions. And when the government engaged them to partake in the commission, they had no real grasp or concept of what they were going through at that point. And that was kind of, you could nearly forgive that if the truth was going to be published. But then, so they let them on. There was no support, even counseling or anything around that time. And they, you know, like even myself and my mom, we weren't even aware that it was happening. So they didn't even make a huge effort to even, I think there was 500 out of like 100,000 that gave evidence. So it's, you know, but then when the report was published, the words, the language in the report was absolutely astounding, like totally devoid of empathy. It was really juvenile, basic, unprofessional language. That it was almost like saying, look, we're just ticking a box here. Like it, you know, we're not going to even paint the picture properly of what happened. And then, so that's one thing, that it was a really disrespectful delivery of their stories. And then it was the misrepresentation of truth. If a person doesn't feel listened to, so these survivors, all of their lives, have, so many of them have never even told a soul that this happened. And I'm conscious that there's so many out there haven't even told their husbands or their close family, and their voices have been oppressed and silenced. And then for this one thing that was supposed to be the opposite of that, to continue to suppress their voices, and even worse, misrepresent and lie about what they said. Like, I can't even tell you the how that will re-traumatize, you know, the effect is awful. And it's just, when a person doesn't feel listened to, it invalidates their humanity. And this report was a manifestation of how much they were not listened to for 100 years, how much they were oppressed, and how much today they're still, at this time of healing, this was an opportunity for healing, that they're still being oppressed. And the interviews and everything around the mother and baby homes, like, you know, Roderick O'Gorman, he's a minister for children, and Micheál Martin, they must have been trying to be empathetic, but just the language that they used, it was cold, it was callous, it was clinical. And then to have this whole dialogue around suppressing the archives and locking the archives away under lock and key, sealing the records for 30 years, like that whole debacle that erupted, it was like, where's your humanity? Like empathy is one of the most basic values or basic necessities for being a human. And if you lack empathy in any endeavor, like, you know, it's going to be a shitfest. But if you lack empathy in this, probably one of the darkest periods in Irish history since the famine or the colonization, you know, like if you're going to deal with that and you're dealing with living survivors without empathy, what do you think is going to happen? Like, you know,
I do like what you're saying there about empathy. It is one of those kind of basic things that we should all know about. But there is something lost in us when it comes to empathy, where people don't quite understand it and they mix it up with sympathy. But another thing that kind of strikes me about that, you know, the event and the conversations around it, this seems like people don't really understand what trauma is. It's like they calculate trauma differently than they should, you know. And this goes across the board. This is talking about what the mother and baby homes, obviously, but even talking about mental health, all those kind of things that we calculate in a way, like if we don't understand the trauma, and I'll never understand the trauma that people in the mother and baby homes had. I won't be able to understand it. But that doesn't mean that you can kind of be clinical like the government were, in the sense of empathy and almost like seeing the trauma as something less than what it was, which is pretty scummy. That's probably not a good word to use, but it's certainly something that really would kind of disgust you a little bit. You know, that idea, and it seems to me from what you're telling it, it's there's a clinical nature to this report, and the statement they brought out about this report.
yeah, exactly. And like, I mean, empathy should be taught in schools. Like I was very lucky in when I studied counseling and psychotherapy. Basically, the most important part of those studies or of being a counselor is what's called the 3 core principles of person-centered therapy, which was developed by a guy called Carl Rogers. And they, like, for you to have to be able to offer some kind of healing or to be able to offer support for anyone going through anything in their mental health, you need to have 3 things present. One of those is empathy. The other is positive regard for the person, unconditional positive regard, and non-judgmentalism. They're the 3 basic things. And in my opinion, they're the 3 basic things that you need to be a functional, good human in life as well. And I was lucky enough to come across that in my studies in counseling, but these are the things that should be taught in schools because, like, empathy is so lacking in our society now, you know, from the government, the ignorant display of lack of empathy at that level. But that filters down through so much, you know. And it's because I suppose it's so simple. When things are so simple, they're overlooked, you know. And empathy is very basically the ability to see from another person's perspective, or the ability to be able to relate to what they're feeling. It's not necessarily, as you say, sympathy. It's not like coming from a place of feeling sorry for. It's just to be able to open your heart to connect with their experience of being human. And sometimes that they might be experiencing human on the joyful side of things, or they might be experiencing being human on the suffering side. And like, we are a tribal species, you know, community for us is everything. And when a person feels listened to, and when a person feels that another person is connecting in with their present experience, healing just happens in that resonance, literally. And there's even a name for it in counseling. It's like, it's the 3rd presence or something that it's called. It's just this, when 2 people relate in that relationship of love and empathy, that in itself can provide healing. And it's so important. And if we're to progress as a species, empathy is the number one thing that we can engage before anything else, before the science, before innovation, before everything, because empathy will inform all of that, will inform science to go in the right direction. You know, Einstein discovered E equals mc squared, but then we got the atomic bomb. What we need to happen is for people to have empathy, so that when the next E equals mc squared is discovered, we can, you know, understand what the science is around hands-on healing, for example, whatever. So empathy is so important.
Here, here. I could not have put it better. Let me get in the let me get in the advert here, and we'll see how we get on with this. This should be interesting. One of these days I'm going to record this and just start putting it in the middle of the episodes. But until then, okay. Fusion Training Center, Monksland Athlone, a place to train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, kickboxing, martial arts, and CrossFit. A great atmosphere with experienced coaches, and a real sense of community. If you want to join the team, find us on Facebook at Fusion Training Center or drop in for a chat. Fusion Training Center, train like a warrior. Hopefully that'll be open again in May, and we can get some training in. That would be nice. We'll see though. Don't get carried away just yet. But now I'm going into the deep end, folks, into a place, my favorite swimming pool, the lack of knowledge pool, and I'm going in head first here, right? So, Laura, can you tell us about what Imbas is? You paused.
Sure. Imbas is in Irish now currently, Imbas is the word for inspiration, but not many people know that. There's another word for inspiration. I think it's inspiroid, which is fairly one-dimensional word. But Imbas comes from the old Irish concept of Imbas ferocene, which means divine inspiration or knowledge which illuminates. And it was actually a technique of the ancient poets of Ireland. So wisdom tradition, where the poets were held in the highest esteem in our community, in our society. They were actually next to the king. They were a massive support to the king, in the king's ability to be able to lead in right relationship with the land and right relationship with its people. The poet actually was the person who could provide that level of healing for the king, and to provide services of prophecy and truth telling and all the rest of it. So Imbas ferocene was a technique that the poets of Ireland used to use to access these higher states of consciousness, so that they could draw down the poetic inspiration and draw down words and poems that were not just ordinary poems, that were poetry imbued with power. And that would be the power to heal if there was divisions within the people, if there was looming war, if the land wasn't flourishing. The poets used to access this higher state of consciousness, and then, I suppose, disengage the rational mind and disengage the subjectivity of it, and connect into something greater within themselves and universally, and then bring down these words and this poetry that was going to help in some way to guide the people of the time, or guide the leaders in doing the right thing. And our ancient mythology speaks an awful lot about it. No, not an awful lot. If you have eyes to see and ears to listen, you got Imbas in our mythology. But it's been suppressed, again, like the female voices throughout our history. Imbas is something that was suppressed through the years. And when St. Patrick came to Ireland, and Roman Catholicism came to Ireland, St. Patrick banned the techniques for accessing Imbas. And since then, it's kind of been written out of our history. So while there are references to it in history, like Fionn McCool, for example, he got Imbas when he caught the salmon of knowledge, and the wisdom that's in his wisdom is Imbas, but we never learned it as Imbas. We just learned that he got the knowledge of all things. So when Roman Catholicism came, Imbas, the techniques for Imbas was banned, and there's very, very little written about it apart from those references that you kind of have to go looking to find. And anything that is written is written with the patriarchal bias. So it's written with the biases of the Christian monks at the time, and they were obviously making a concerted effort to move us out of our indigenous ways and into the either the colonial way, the empire, or their new religion that they were bringing in. So Imbas has been lost. Like Imbas, our conscious knowledge of Imbas has been lost, and there's very little written about it apart from maybe some commentary on those biased writings that exist in our ancient manuscripts, in the medieval manuscripts. But this is a concept that's going back thousands of years, and it was an oral tradition. So that not only was it not written down, but it was forcibly suppressed and lost. But I believe that Imbas has always existed in our land, the energy of it within our landscape and within us as a people. Like Irish music and Irish literature, like, we overachieve in comparison to kind of, our population. And everyone would agree that there is a certain type of magic in Irish music, in Irish literature, that really captures the hearts and imaginations of everyone around the world. And my sense is that it's this innate sense of Imbas that's still within our epigenetic memory, that is within our spirit, that is within our DNA. Colonizers can suppress so much, but they broke our spirit, but I believe we didn't truly lose our spirit. And it's the energy of Imbas, I think, that we subconsciously have, that really makes magic of our poetry and magic of our music. And I had this random experience of Imbas, a spontaneous experience in 2013 that got me to understand what it is. And ever since then, I've been on it's just been my passion to understand it and to retrieve it, to go back into the trenches of our history and try and figure out where it was suppressed. What can we use of that to really inform how to ignite our imagination and how to creative flow. And I discovered that all these disparate things and these random passions I had through my life actually all connected back into Imbas. I believe Yeats had the knowledge of how to access Imbas, and he spoke about it in different kind of more coded ways in his writings, and various other, like, and even the healing energy, a lot of it can be explained in what I'm learning about Imbas and stuff like that as well. And what we have the benefit of now is science, and there's so much in quantum physics, and there's so much in the studies that scientists are doing around creativity and around all of that actually corroborate what, like, the poets knew. So what I love to do, or what I'm in the process of trying to do now, is to marry the new and the old, and to try and revive our conscious understanding of Imbas. I believe it's always there innately in all of us, but to just put words to it and put conscious understanding and have it available. It's very simple. It's not anything that's highfalutin. There's various things you can do to really bring it on in you. And that's how I wrote the letter, was accessing that state of Imbas. And I just want to make that available, and to say, fuck you colonizers, and fuck you empire. Like, you can't take this away from us. I'm bringing it back.
Yeah, and rightly so. Yeah, rightly so. And I suppose then, because you mentioned poetry there, I suppose I want to know when that became something that was very important to you, because we were just chatting before we started recording, and poetry in schools was, it wasn't the most exciting and attractive, form, I suppose.
No, it wasn't. No, like, I mean, it was just another subject, and it wasn't, well, it wasn't taught in any way that was, like, inspiring, and it was very factual, and like, poetry is like teaching poetry factually is the last thing. Like, there's a certain amount of rationality. You have your techniques and your onomatopoeia and your alliteration grand, but like, which the old poets of Ireland had, like they had to study for 12 years, the techniques, the rational techniques. But that was only so that they could facilitate this downpour of higher consciousness to put through this form. And poetry in schools, just doesn't go there. Like, even in the therapeutic aspect of poetry, like teenageville is a tough terrain to navigate. Like it's a tough part of your life, and if we have the opportunity to study poetry when we're teenagers, how can you do it without going near the therapeutic value of reading poetry or of writing poetry? And poetry for me has gotten me through some really, really tough times. Like, if you listen to Rudyard Kipling, like If, or even the Sunscreen song, like I play that, like, I don't know if you know it. It was
Yeah, I do, yeah.
I still play that random, like, poetry doesn't have to be like Nobel Prize. Do you know what I mean? If you could have one or two lines on the tip of your tongue that you can just access, but then more importantly, it's the opportunity for teachers in the education system is to spark that creativity in their students. And it was Yeats that said, education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. Whereas our education system just drums things and just calls on people's memory, and memory is a very different thing to creation. And I was very lucky in 1994 in Ballyfin. And Ballyfin, incidentally, the Irish name is Baile Fionn. So it was actually where I went to school was the place in the Slieve Blue Mountains where Fionn McCool was born. So I found that fascinating. So it was like our English teacher asked us to write a poem on anything that we had passion about. So that was the first poem I ever wrote, and it was about the moon, and it was a very simple, you're magical, and but the second and the third ones just came spontaneously, not from her asking. Like, I think she was the catalyst that made me realize, oh my God, I can put the pen to paper. And now she didn't say at the time about the therapeutic value or anything, but even just her asking me actually spurred me in my own spare time then, when I carried an awful lot of sadness because of the pain that my mom carried. And it wasn't that she's a hero. Like she gets on with her life, and she's really positive, and she didn't get consumed by her pain. But I was a very empathetic person, and highly sensitive, highly intuitive. So I could just feel the pain that she carried from her experience. And my next two poems I remember writing in my room were about her experience, and they were about, one was called The Forgotten Mother, and the other one was called The Pain of a River. And that was about, like, it was very basic poems, but it was The Pain of a River specifically was about, my mom and me were two rivers, and where one river had a big load. Now, when I came along, I was able to take half of her load. Like, I consciously, purposely wanted to take her pain from her so that she didn't have to carry it all. And I found huge healing in that for myself, huge healing in that writing. And I just stayed writing then. I never called myself a poet, like, until really, really recently. I don't know, there's a whole other, like, kind of a thing around unworthiness or of owning your own abilities or whatever. But it was just, it was innate in me. Like, the healing and the poetry was just innate. Like, some people are singers. I would love to be a singer. I can't sing for shit. But I can heal with my hands, and I can write poetry. And I just did that all the way through my life. Yeah.
The thing about poetry, like, it's funny we talk about, like, in schools, because it didn't appeal to me at all in school. Even like something like Shakespeare was all right. I didn't mind it as long as someone was there to explain, the old, text to me. But the poetry just I didn't have any much interest in it. And then I kind of was really into music, like, and I was really into lyrics, and started appreciating them as outside of having like some chords around them. They were poems, and I was reading the autobiography of John Cooper Clarke the other day, and I no, well, about a month ago, and I realized that that's my type of poetry. It's the same as music. I mean, you might like the Beatles, you might hate the Beatles. That's fine. That's just your own kind of thing. But I realized like John Cooper Clarke's kind of every man kind of poetry, street poetry as such, is
Mhm.
just my kind of thing. And the old, the old Irish or English poets, whoever, just don't kind of work for me, and that's fine. But it's good to dip in, I think. And the people talk about Bob Dylan or Neil Young and all these amazing songwriters, like they are just poems just put to music. And I think that's what you realize.
Exactly. And it's a pity that we weren't kind of directed, like, or told that at that
Yeah.
young age, because I love music too. Like, age 14, I was listening to Pearl Jam and
Mm,
Nirvana and even like Leonard Cohen. And it's only recently that I realized that Leonard Cohen was a poet before he
mm,
ever was a singer. Like, melody was kind of secondary to his, and what a poet
mm,
he was. Like, and Imelda May now has a new album out,
mm,
and the lyrics, like the musicality of and the production and all of that is incredible, and it really fires me up. It fires everybody up that I've spoken to. But if you even take the music away and read the lyrics, like they are incredible, and it's like there's a woman now who just has Imbas pouring out through every cell in her body. And the thing about Imbas is it multiplies. So if you experience someone else, a piece of someone's work that's come from Imbas, it will spark it in you. And like her songs, there's one song she has it's called Breathe. It's written from the perspective of a tree.
okay.
And yeah, and it reminds us like that we would not exist without trees.
Mm,
We breathe out what they give us, and then vice versa. And again, it links us to our ancient Irish past where trees were honored and they were sacred. And she's another song called Made to Love, which is like, again, it's all about that empathy. It's pure rock and roll. Like the melody and the guitar and the drums are just like, I just rock and dance around the house listening to it.
yeah, that's brilliant though, to find that,
Yeah,
and find that
yeah.
kind of that what you're talking about, like the Amos, because from what I'm getting back from it is, that there is it's more than just this inspiration and this what you write, but what you kind of give back, like, and that's huge. And all this, we obviously grew up around the same time, so we would have been listening to our in the same syllabus as in English and the same poems. But I was listening to Nirvana when I was around that age, and like back in '94 and that, and I remember like I didn't really pay attention to a lot of the lyrics because they seem to be like washed over with the noise and the sound. And then when you take them out, actually they're really good lyrics. They're quite dark, but they're still just as good as something that's bright and poppy and whatever it is. So yeah, like Imelda May, great, amazing voice. Anyway, I did see you put up something about her new album coming out as well, and I'm gonna have to check it out, especially the one Breed, because you also mentioned that. Um, so like there's another thing I was reading about. So the Celtic Reconstructionist paganism, right? I had to read that because I would never remember that, right? So they say that that's a reason that Imbas is coming into modern Ireland. We'll say it was, as I think you said, it was never lost anyway. But almost like making us all aware of it. Why do you think it's so important for it to be here and for people to know about it?
It's so important because if we, again, it's like it's that colonization hangover, right? I don't believe that we ever fully grieved or mourned for the most important things that were lost throughout famine and throughout colony and all of that. And but our spirits know, like this is such a big part of being Irish because it comes up from the life force in the land, and it comes from our DNA, our genes, this Imbus. And if we are unconscious of it, it can kind of go into the shadow a bit,
Mm,
and it just feels like there's a block, a block to the essence of who you are. But when it's brought back into conscious awareness, both as a thing that was lost, but now, even because a lot of people aren't conscious that this thing was taken away from it. That's the thing I couldn't believe when I started to research Imbas. So little is written about it. And like St. Patrick banished the snakes, right? There was never snakes in Ireland. Where are they going with the snakes? But like the Imbas in other traditions, it's not called Imbas, but in my understanding, this life force energy, can call it chi or can call it prana, is symbolized, or kundalini is symbolized as a serpent, a coiled serpent. And A.E., he was Yeats's best friend. He was a mystic and a writer, and he believed that this serpentine force was the creative energy, and was the snakes, that the druidic force that St. Patrick banished. And we need to understand that that's a history that's been suppressed, and we need to just bring back in the knowledge of the suppression, but more importantly, so we can kind of take it out of the shadow, and then, but more importantly, really consciously learn how to connect with this creative force, or this generative force. Because if what's written as well, I suppose more subliminally in the writings of A.E. and stuff like that, is that by taking our knowledge of our life force away, or our connection to nature, what the colonizers and the Roman Catholics did was we lost our connection to ourselves. We lost our connection, our ability to harness and work with our own life force energy, so that we could fully access our own empowerment, our own intuition, our own healing abilities. And if for religion to get into the realms of power that they needed to be, well, they needed to suppress our own accessing of our own power. So that's why it's important now for us to really come into this understanding. And it's like science is kind of getting there now with all, but the understanding is all in disparate places. There's no real unifying concept that's bringing our scientific understanding of creativity with the philosophical understanding of gnosis. So say Plato would have spoken of gnosis as a direct experience of the divine, or goes back way into our even early Christians speak of gnosis. And then our Imbas is the same thing. So there's no unification of all of these things into one understandable concept, relayed back to people in just a really easy, understandable, down to earth way. Because fundamentally, this is really easy. You could go into the science of the quantum physics and all of that, which I hope I'll be able to do. Not that I'm any, like, science is not my forte. I'd love to point people in the direction of what's been written. But you could go there if you want, but basically it's very simple, and it's really accessing Imbas is just all about coming into the present moment and opening your heart, basically.
Yeah.
Just to let people know of the power of that and the importance of that.
So I read a little bit about Imbas, and I read about meditation, as part of it. The people get into meditation as part of it, and get obviously through that have been in trance-like states through the meditation. Now, that's not just to do with Imbas, that's more to do with meditation in general, because obviously that can be achieved through it. Is meditation a part of it for you?
Yeah, I'm not as disciplined with the meditation as I should be.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I have friends, who are meditation teachers and daily practitioners. I really wish I could be, because I know if I was, my Imbas would be off the charts, and my level of contentment and everything. I'm working on that, but the technique, like one of the techniques that was banned by St. Patrick, was actually a ritual whereby the poets used to go into the darkness And that is a kind of a mechanism for Imbas. They say that if the poet or the practitioner goes into a dark room and engages in sensory deprivation, so has no sound, has no light, has no stimulation of any sort, and goes into the darkness and just surrenders to the darkness, that this illumination would just happen after, well, in the old writings, it says either 3 or 9 nights, days and nights. But my understanding and reading of it is that the darkness is a very important part of it, of accessing Imbas. And it doesn't have to be a literal immersion into a dark room. If you can be in the darkness, either in your emotional state, in a state of depression, or in the physical darkness, like be in nighttime, be in a dark room, and be in the darkness in a sense of presence, and in a sense understanding that, as our ancient ancestors understood, that the darkness was the beginning of everything. So in ancient Ireland, twilight was actually the start of the day, and Samhain, like November, was the start of the year. And that's because they honored the darkness. So in our modern life, we kind of run away from the darkness, and everything needs to be light filled and whatever. But they honored the darkness. And it was, if you think about it, a seed has to be in the depths of the earth to grow. And if you take Newgrange, for example, which was our monument that was built to harness the light of the rising sun on solstice. So the darkest point of our whole year is the few minutes before the rising sun on solstice morning on the 21st of December. But it's at that darkest point that the most potent illumination, spark of illumination, came for our ancestors. And that's why, in my opinion, Newgrange was built to harness the first rays of the light, the light of the rising sun. And the light came in through the monument and rested on a stone that had a carving of the triskel, which is 3 spirals, which is a symbol for the serpentine life force. So it was like, again, the Newgrange is said to have been a darkness, like a womb, an incubator for the darkness, to honor the darkness, but also to symbolically represent the importance of the illumination that can come from the point of deepest darkness. So I believe 2 things then. I believe a state of deep depression can actually be a really fertile place from which creativity can grow. Like, I know for myself, you're not going to write anything when you're in the throes of it. Like, you're just, apathy. But the most profound things in my life were written right at the point of when I was emerging from the deepest darkness, including that letter to the Taoiseach. So I think that's a really useful thing for us all to kind of remember within our mental health, that the darkness is actually necessary, and that it can be really helpful if we can surrender to it and exist and accept the darkness with a sense of presence, knowing that it's not an end in itself, that our ancients looked on it as actually a beginning.
Yeah, that's interesting, actually. The darkness is, it's funny, I was just thinking about the darkness there on the I don't know why. It's just how dark my face is on this thing. And I know my mother keeps going on. Well, she does. She said it once. I always say, when you say that about someone, they're always going on about it. They only said it once, really. They exaggerate everything. But the light is over there. If I move the light over to here, I'm going to have some severe eye damage. Have you got some? I asked Kira this last week. She was illuminated just like you are. What's going on in front of you?
I'm really bad. I don't know any of the tricks with the lights and all. So I just have my window.
That's the trick. That is right there. But so you touched on the fact to do with healing, and you helped your mother with it. Was there a sense of I suppose pressure on you then? Like, if people started to know about it, you're saying just people, neighbors or whatever, especially at 14, did you feel a little bit of pressure?
Oh, for sure.
Mm.
Like, this was so far, even in Ireland back then, again, not only did we not speak about mental health, like we're still very staunch Catholic around this time, and all of this stuff was witch stuff, like,
Mm.
seen as woo-woo as evil. Now I knew innately, no way. This just arose from me as a real natural. It was love based. It was
Mm.
literally, my intention was focus on my love for my mom out through my hands. It was nothing more complicated than that. But magic happened, like,
Mm.
or magic happened. And it felt very big for me. It was like, because there was no dialogue about it. I had no frame of reference. I had no language for it. It was an awful lot of pressure. And I knew innately how natural it was. But then there was, there was the niggling thing of, oh, Jesus, what forces am I working with? Like, so
Yeah.
I warned my mom to just say nothing, but she was always such a support. Like, she was, and she's really progressive herself, and she obviously she was the one that was firsthand feeling the power of it. So when I was 18, the Late Late Show was on, and they had these people who were speaking about Reiki on the Late Late Show, and we were like, oh my God, there's a language for this, like, there's Reiki. And then she said, why don't we go and see if we can get you trained up in this? And that felt right to me. And we found a lovely woman, Teresa Collins in Cork, who wrote a book, again, very pioneering at the time, in the 1990s. And I went and got trained up. And then I decided, again, it was still, I didn't really tell. All my friends knew, like anyone that were close knew, and they all probably felt and experienced it, but it was still nothing. I'd have to really trust you to tell you or whatever. And it didn't even occur to me that this could be like, that this is a gift that I could use as a career, or more importantly, like, that this was my purpose. Like I said, I landed in marketing and I liked it and all the rest of it, but there was always, there was stuckness in it a bit, just within my own self, and I suppose a lack of fulfillment in elements. But I never, when I was a teenager and in my 20s, I just never thought that this was I didn't want to be seen as a witch, or I didn't want to have to deal with the constantly defending myself or whatever. And plus, I didn't properly understand it. So ever since then, I was on a mission to look at the science, to look at theological approaches, to look at the spirituality. And I've been a real nerd since my teenage years, reading up everything. And I suppose it's probably in the last 10 years that now I feel like I have a real grasp of the science of it, of the practical applications of how to work with it to preserve my own health, and to, understand every aspect of it. And I suppose the weight has dissipated of that now. I carried the weight of that all through my life, and that prevented me from, going more public, or helping more people with it. But I always felt guilty. And my mom actually became a healer herself. So a year after I did my training, she was like seeing how the incredible things that were like miracles, like, were happening. And she said she wanted to go and study, and she did. And she went into it. So she became an actual healer. Yeah. So she's been like a hero for 20 years in Leash. Like, hundreds and thousands of people have come through her doors, and she's a healing room. And oh my God, like, people with cancer and depression and anxiety, and like, suicide is probably the biggest one, and the most profound. And there's not a person that has come through the door that she hasn't helped. She is a born healer, an innate healer. And it goes back to my granddad, her dad, who she says his healing hands just used to work magic as well. So now, so she was more courageous than me. She didn't need the science, or she was just trusting her gut. And she was probably more of a pioneer. I was probably more afraid of what people would think, or just didn't want to be defending myself.
You're quite young as well, and
Yeah.
that How do you feel about people? And I'm talking about the people who are not being, they're not being nasty or anything kind of snide about it, but they're questionable. Maybe there's someone who doesn't believe in things until they see it or they feel it themselves. Like,
Yeah.
and how do you feel about people, who just they're not being, trying to be a dick or anything, but they're just asking the questions. Like, um, you're willing to obviously have chats and conversation with people like that. I have no doubt you are. Um, but is there still that kind of little bit of pushback from people that just aren't quite able to kind of believe it?
Yeah, and that's completely natural. I
Mm,
mean, unless I experienced it, I wouldn't. Um, and that's the thing about Imbas or gnosis versus religion. Imbas is based on personal experience. So like the most profound successes, I suppose, or miracles that my mum specifically, she'd always say this: the most profound healings actually happen to those people who come because they've nowhere else to turn, or their
mm,
girlfriend said they have to, or else they're going to break up. If they couldn't handle the depression or anxiety and
yeah.
whatever, and they were forced. And it's nearly sometimes useful in a way to have that. Oh no, it always is useful to have that level of skepticism or level of critical
Yeah.
awareness or questioning. Like it really is, because then it allows for more understanding. But the real thing about this stuff is just experience. So for anyone, I suppose a leap of faith is
Mm,
needed, and to go in and experience it once. And it's very important that you engage your intuition, because I would be very hesitant and reluctant. I've only really gone to two healers myself in my whole life. As much as I understand about it and
mm,
believe in it and know about, the power of it, you still need a lot of discernment and to place your trust in who. And this is where intuition comes in. Obviously, word of mouth is really important, and recommendations, and and my mom never advertised. She didn't believe in that. She's like, the right people will be attracted, the people
mm,
who are right for me and who I'm right for them. And they always were, like, and I would say always question, do your research. Like that would give you you know, confidence, I suppose, and widen your understanding, but keep the mind open. Like
yeah.
my mind stayed closed all around all of those things. I don't know where I'd be now. I'd have all these gifts that I wouldn't even know what they were, and then I'd be grumpy and I wouldn't be able to express
Mm.
myself. And it's just really important to keep a really open mind. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, of course. I wanted to talk to you about this was just a pure coincidence. I had asked Laura to come on, and Laura actually spoke to me about Lyme disease, and I told Laura that I had Lyme disease. I'll just get my pathetic little story out of the way first. I got it. I got it in New York. It looked like a bruise on my arm, but it's kind of circles all the way around it. And my auntie Mia, said you better go get that checked out. And went to the doctor immediately, and he said that's Lyme disease. Here's some tablets, and it was gone away. Now, that was very fortunate that I had Mia there because I did not know what it was before she said those words. But you've had a far, far more difficult experience with it.
You are so lucky. Like literally, that was a sliding doors moment in your life. Like you
Yeah.
will look back and you will say, like, that moment of your aunt knowing what to do
Mm.
changed the trajectory of your whole life. And thank the
Thank you.
gods and thank whoever,
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically I got by mosquitoes. I think
Oh.
I went to yeah, I think so, to Thailand in 2008, 12 years ago, and I went to on a jungle trek just for a couple of nights, and I got bitten head to toe. I'm presuming they're mosquitoes. They're probably a mixture of everything,
Mm.
head to toe. And it was grand. It was just, yeah, very unattractive for a couple of weeks. It was like grand. I'm in the jungle. What did I expect? But none of my friends got bitten like that. And then didn't think any more about it. And then maybe 2 years later in work, I was on this big, massive project in work, and I started to get really fatigued, like, and I just put it down to really hardcore project. I was leading this kind of world first thing that we were doing, and it was really demanding. And I used to have to just I'd put everything into it during the week, and then at the weekends I would just like die on the couch, and literally my mom had to take over my washing my clothes, feeding me, all of this at the weekend. But the two of us just thought it was the level of work that I was doing. But then that just continued, and even when the project finished and everything, that was the way of my life. Then from about 10 years ago on, I was able to function in work at times really difficultly, like really like your brain fog and stuff like that was really chronic. And I had to kind of stop my social life, because the only way I could function in work was to rest in the evenings and at the weekends, and lost contact with so many of my friends. And then it started to get worse and worse, and then we were like, oh, we need to do something here. I need to look into this. And we've been trying to look into it for the last maybe 6 years. Went to neurologists, went to everything, and just couldn't find anything wrong, and I knew, again, intuition. I knew there was something in my system that wasn't right, but I couldn't get to the bottom of it. And then about 2 years ago, then I was living a really fast-paced life. Really, the doctors were like astounded, like like people with Lyme basically get bedridden after about 2 years. But I was commuting from Laois to Dublin, like a 3-hour round trip every day, really fast-paced job, like really demanding job. And I had a baby 3 years ago, and really like pushing myself, like really. But I just thought the tiredness again was the result of pushing myself, but underneath I knew there was something more. 2 years ago then just collapsed all of a sudden. Then it was like, I just can't, the body just shut down. It says you're not doing anymore. I had to go sick from work. I thought I'd be going sick for about a few weeks to just regain my strength and go back to the grind. And then stayed debilitated for a year, like bedridden, and my family they know how much of a fighter I am, and they know how much kind of strength and resolve and stuff like that. So for them to see me like this, they were like, shit, something is massive here. And got tested for a load of things, nothing came back, and stayed like that for a year, helpless, really helpless. And even my own, I have the ability to self-heal and everything, and that's probably what kept me through for the 10 got me through for the 10 years. But that just wasn't cutting it anymore. And then eventually a friend spoke to me about Lyme disease, that their friend had it, went to get tested in Ireland. The test came back negative. No, I don't have it. And for 3 months, I just was lying in my bed again, like not able to do anything. And then somebody told me about these tests in Germany and said that the Lyme tests in Ireland have 50% false positive and false negative readings. So I went and got my bloods done in Germany, and I came back and I was feckin' riddled with Lyme and co-infection. So when you have Lyme, your system just your immune system gets really suppressed. It affects every system in your body. It affects your brain. It affects your ability to detoxify everything. And because of that, I had multiple other infections as well. It was like Bartonella. There was like the list as long as your arm, and that's only for what they were testing for. So there's probably a load of other things that weren't even tested for. So eventually, I broke down crying, and it was like, it was better than winning the lotto to actually discover what was wrong with you, because so many people were thinking, it's a mental health thing. It's in your head. It's not real, or you're not believed. Are you hypochondriac? My family never did. Oh my God, they were just amazing. But you do, that's what you get projected, and sometimes even project that onto yourself then when you're in moments, you know. And yeah, then I suppose I was able to start treatment. There's only one doctor in Ireland that treats it, because it's a disease that, for some reason in Ireland, we are about 50 years behind the rest of the world. In America, they have, you know, proper treatments. It's accepted. But in Ireland is like, it's just not understood. There's a line of thinking that says the government are putting a concerted effort to try and diminish understanding, because it will affect tourism, because the hotspots are in all of the tourist places now. I don't know, but it's ridiculous. You can't get proper treatment. Like, you need to get IV antibiotics for a long period of time to really hit the bacteria. But in Ireland, it's not legal. And that's why so many people have to go for really expensive treatment in Germany or in America. But I anyway got in to see Dr. Lambert, who is incredible. And he's basically putting himself out there as well, because the medical establishment don't fully endorse Lyme as a disease, and he's a lot of tough battles to face, but he treats, and he goes over and beyond to treat hundreds of patients, like every month for Lyme. And he has me on long-term antibiotics now, and I'm obviously starting to really benefit from that. But it can be a long road. You know, I've been on herbal medication, which is incredible for Lyme. I've been on that for a year, I think, and the long-term antibiotics, which are really hard because they're orals, but it takes longer for them to work, and very hard on the system. But thankfully, we're getting places, and it's just, you know, it's a pity that more people don't know, because the difference between you and many people with Lyme have to stay like that forever, like bedridden. And like, I have a child, and you know, it's a hell on earth, and that's not an exaggeration, because there's a lot of people suffering on earth now, and I don't want to diminish, but that's the reality for a Lyme patient. And the difference is that, because your aunt was Lyme literate, and she knew that a rash, it's a round rash you get after you're bitten, and if you get antibiotics within 30 days of getting that rash, you won't have a problem for the rest of your life. But if you don't, and the Lyme exists and is ravaging your body for years and years, your chances of recovery are slimmer and slimmer. And it's the difference between your life stolen and your life being able to be lived, you know?
Yeah, and like, people, like you said, not a lot of people know what it is. And I've mentioned to a couple of people that I, you know, had it when I was young, and I got rid of it straight away. But like, it can cause paralysis and stuff. And I got the leaflet out of the hospital, and when I saw it, it was 18 when I was over, and I saw it, and I saw these kind of stories about it, and I was like, geez, this was a lot more serious than I thought it was, you know, like a little bite off a tick. So, but you're like, obviously it's been a long road, but you're slowly kind of starting to see the kind of benefits from the antibiotics you're on now.
Yeah, and it's not just the antibiotics, as Dr. Lambert himself says. It's the antibiotics don't work on their own. Like, the Lyme bacteria is a highly complex, sophisticated piece of work. They say, like, tuberculosis is its simple, stupid sister.
Oh, right.
Like,
Okay.
so and it affects every single system and mechanism in your body. So you have to treat to delve into medicine. Conventional medicine alone really can't and doesn't work. You have to understand things like supplements and things like energy. And again, here's where my knowledge of Imbas and life force energy, you have to understand how that works, like yoga, meditation, because stress, the hormones and the chemistry that stress produces actually activates all of the Lyme bacteria again. And so it's a really, like, my full-time job now is healing. That's been the case for 2 years, but I suppose I've really been on the path since I understood what I was working with. And I have a huge respect for conventional medicine, and I have a huge respect for alternative medicine. And I kind of get triggered when I hear either being polarized, when I hear, conventional medicine is all bad. I used to kind of be a bit like that myself, and big pharma, which I'm
Pharma, yeah, that's the thing.
and it's so the profiteering and everything just riles me so much, but we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I'm glad for that learning, and I can't wait to be fully healed, because I'm going to campaign. I'm going to be an advocate for Lyme and education and healing and everything, and the likes of Dr. Lambert and other, because the thing is, Lyme, you're so tired, you can't campaign. It needs for people who are healed and cured. So that'll be my next thing when I'm fully better. Yeah.
So kind of going off the back of that, then, what do you like to do in your quiet time? So I know you have a small child as well, so that's hard to get the time. But if you do get an hour here or there, what do you like to do?
Reading and writing. I should be meditation, and I love, like, the thing. I don't know why when I meditate, I get into that. Literally, I can access bliss in a split second, which many people have to work years to try and get there. So it's kind of, I don't know why I resist it so much, because that would really help my healing. So anyway, sometimes I do meditation, but not as much as I should. And other times it would be music and writing and reading. Like, I have books and I collect antique books, and now so it's now I can't read, because with Lyme you can't it's very hard to focus and everything. So it would be just like whatever I can absorb on a particular day, and it will only be a few pages at a time or whatever. You just have to take things in bite-sized chunks. So
that's that all good, all the good things, though, to be fair. They're all the good things that people like to do in the spare time. Laura, it's been an excellent chat. I've really enjoyed speaking to you, and very informative.
Oh, thank you.
It's given me things to go away to look up and see, because I like the whole thing about it. Like, with every episode, there's something that might help me or suit me. Even it doesn't have to be necessarily help that suit me. I might suit my lifestyle. So it's important for me to go away and kind of go, well, Imbas is definitely something that I'd be interested learning about and reading about. So it's been fun learning about that. Thanks again for being our 50th guest. That's they can never take that away from you, Laura. But hang around there for a minute until I close this out, and I just want to get a picture with you, if that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks a million, Eric.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks a million to John for me annoying him again this week because of the mess last week. Thank you very much for my mum, my dad, my granddad, Jared, and Calvin. There's another leash person there. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's the Weekly, obviously. It's the same on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Google Podcasts are all the podcast platforms you can listen to on it. Thanks to everyone for listening again on this Wednesday morning or whenever you listen to it. And we will see you obviously next week. It goes without saying. Once again, Laura, thanks a million.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks.
And we are out for another episode. Take care, everyone. Bye.